Chapter 41. Ray felt wretched. She'd murdered a little boy called Lance. She couldn't remember exactly how, but she knew she'd done it. He was her best friend, and she'd murdered him, and she'd tried to hide what she'd done, and now she'd been found out. Ray was only a young child herself, but she was old enough to know right from wrong, and there'd be no special treatment for her. Her entire life was ahead of her, and she'd ruined it all by murdering her best friend. Murderer. She was a murderer. The guilt was unbearable, and every time Ray glimpsed the boy's remains, all mixed up in the cellar's wall, she shuddered with self-condemnation. Why did she do these kind of things? And why didn't she conceal them better? Of course, the plaster would flake away in a damp basement like this. Of course it would. Why hadn't she thought of that when she'd mixed the body into the walls? It was just a matter of time before someone saw what she'd done. His pale white knee was sticking out at least an inch. And if that wasn't obvious enough, then the hand was unmistakable. Oh, Christ. Just a matter of time before they all saw what a monster she was. There was no time to cover it up. It was too late. She took the spade and was out of the cellar and striding down the garden, away from it all. The wet, mulchy colours of late autumn were out. Deep browns, the heavy grey of the sky, and there it was. She'd found it. The compost heap. It was taller than she was, and considerably wider. Steam occasionally seeped out from under the flaps of its decomposing leaves. The great compressed mass was very dense, too dense. There was too much pressure. Well, it was going to be a tough job for a young girl like Ray, but at least she'd got here before it was too late. It was just as well she'd brought the garden fork with her. She heaved it into the bottom of the compost heap and levered the handle up to make an opening. High-pressured steam billowed into her face. It didn't burn, but the smell was rancid and rotten. She yanked the fork out again, and with a shunk ploughed it straight back in, hoisting open another vent and releasing more pressure. Got one. Bit mangled, but it looks like someone's in here. Could be a prisoner. Could be anyone. Shit. Doesn't sound like they're having much luck with that fire. Not much time. Might have to leave this one. At some point, Ray noticed the tainted stream of water she stood in. A small, dirty rivulet running downhill away from the compost. Watching it flow, she followed its course and saw the white, inflatable dinghy moored under a tree. Ah, now that would come in handy. She could get out of this nasty-looking water at last. Wasn't doing her any good. Ray was an adult again, sitting in the white dinghy, letting it float downstream, where the water soon broadened out into a small river. The horror she'd experienced in the cellar had dissipated somewhat, but there was still that unnerving feeling underpinning everything. It wasn't so immediate now, but it was there. A troubling sense of foreboding that might boil over into disaster at any moment. We could melt the resin, use your flamer. Could do. Might cook 'em, though. Good point. Even if they lived, they'd be covered in molten resin. Nasty. Shit. Flamer's low. Not much juice. Hi. Ray was addressing the mangy-looking dingo scratching itself with its hind paw. It kept scratching. I said, hi. The dingo paused for a moment, head still cocked into its paw, then continued scrabbling away behind its ear. At last, it stopped scratching and looked up. Finished? She asked. The dingo padded up the lengthy, polished deck of the boat, to the bandstand where Ray sat. A brass instrument was set on each of the chairs around her, but Ray hadn't brought her trombone. It had been such a long time since she played. She wasn't sure she remembered how. "Well, this is," she began to say, hoping the man with the cloven thumb might finish her sentence and help her out. He didn't. "Yes, isn't it?" The dingo sat down and twitched his wet nose, sniffing the breeze. "Have you got any biscuits?" "Biscuits? Yeah, I'd love a biscuit." Ray was about to say no, but thought twice and checked her handbag. There was a fresh packet of digestives in there. "Oh, you're in luck. Do you like digestives?" "Is that a biscuit?" "Yes." "Then I like them." She opened the packet, took one out and tossed it over to the dingo. Mr. Thumb caught it in mid-air, chewed once and swallowed. Hang on. Looks like a cracked bracket around the back. Yeah. We could saw through it and just lift the whole thing out." "Really? Saw through it? You mean actually saw through it with an actual saw?" He seemed a bit down, and Ray wondered what she might say to cheer him up. "Fancy another biscuit?" "Well, if it's not too much bother. Quite tasty, these, He caught the one she threw for him. Digestives. Digestives. Digestives, yes. Why do they call them that?" "Well," Ray thought for a moment, "supposing after you've swallowed them, you digest them." Clever. She looked at the surrounding chairs, each with a shiny brass trumpet, trombone, saxophone, or tuba sat on it, and shrugged. "So it's just you, me, and a packet of digestives." "Oh, go on then. Chuck us another." She did, and they sat in silence for a while, listening to the thud, thud, thud of the old steamboat's paddle wheel, pounding the river as the water hissed and sluiced through it. "Mr. Thumb?" "Yeah." "Am I dreaming?" "More than likely." "Oh." He started licking a front paw, cleaning it thoroughly with his long tongue. One of the pads was split in two. "What's it like then?" he asked. "The dream?" Ray mulled it over. "Well, it's gotten better. Thought I'd killed someone for a bit. God, the guilt. I have to say, it'll be a relief to wake up." "Biscuit?" She didn't wait for his reply, just threw him another. An awkward silence descended, and their steamboat padded on through the lazy river, the sunset a syrupy tangerine on the water's surface. "Mr. Thumb?" "Yeah." "I'm in danger, aren't I?" The dingo looked embarrassed. "Well, yes." Shit. Thought so. Ray considered going over and petting him, but decided against it. Tricky. Fire's not far off. And would it even fit through the door? Probably weighs a ton. Come on, let's go. Just leave it. Nobody's seen him. Most likely dead anyway. We've already salvaged some supplies. A few crates of pulse rifles. Miracle from a wreck like this. They won't miss another bloody exile. We should go. Come on, let's get to fuck. Mr. Thumb wasn't a dingo anymore. He was Ray's brother, dressed in red. The part of Ray that should have reminded her that she was an only child was oddly silent, so she accepted his brotherliness easily enough. Some trees on the riverbank were burning. Yellow tongues of fire licked the branches and trunks, and burnt leaves fell crisp and black. They were strolling through the drifting ashes, fire shouting in the surrounding trees. A flock of small birds darted through the flames, catching a light as they flew past. The two of them ducked, then watched the little black dots smoke and flicker as the flock receded into the distance. They carried on through the fiery trees, pacing carefully along the long grass, avoiding the occasional flaming branch that fell in her path. "Mind out?" He pointed out a tall fir tree that was falling in front of them, its pines crackling with the quick scuds of fire. They stopped and let it fall, then skirted around it. The two of them left the burning copse of trees and started climbing a pleasant, round-shouldered hill. Lush farming country rolled out in every direction as they steadily picked their way up a footpath to the lone tree standing at the crest. She was glad they were walking side by side. There was something comforting about it. The sound of another pair of heavily booted footsteps. "Sir." "Gentlemen, what's this then?" "Resin chamber, sir." "Damaged but intact. Just about to locate some power tools, sir." "No time, lads. Fire's in the walls. We can't put it out. Here, use my rifle. Switch to salvo rounds and knock that bracket out. Grab what's left and go." "Sir, yes, sir." "Try not to hit the chamber directly, lads. Be an awful bloody mess." "Ready. Aim." In her dreamy fugue, Ray hadn't noticed that Mr. Thumb wasn't her brother anymore. From the neck down, he was a buxom young woman with her smooth, plump breasts proudly exposed. From the neck up, he was a wizened old actor in his 70s who'd appeared in an advert Ray had recently seen on TV. The saggy folds of his neck hung down in curtains over his pert, nubile chest, wobbling about as he gobbled a mouthful of biscuits. Although bizarre, his metamorphosis hadn't registered with Ray whatsoever. The path got steeper towards the top of the hill. They leaned into the slope and picked up their pace. It wasn't far to the top, and the last few dozen metres pulled them along. Marching briskly, their arms swung in purposeful arcs, and they fell into a steady rhythm with each other, once or twice brushing each other's hands by accident. Glancing at the old man with the pert bosom, Ray felt the first twitches of attraction. Reaching the tree at the top, the couple looked down upon the city on the other side. It was night time here, and the fires that raged over the vast metropolis flickered and illuminated the ruined city, revealing devastation, destruction, apocalypse. They held hands and watched as the bombs dropped, whistling and exploding somewhere among the dark silhouettes. Buildings collapsed in a cacophony of rubble as Ray and Mr. Thumb turned to face each other. They were both naked now and full of grace. They enveloped one another, wrapping their bodies together until their flesh found its home. At last, they broke their kiss and looked into each other's eyes, stunned and afraid. Ray broke the silence. "You taste of biscuits," she said, and kissed him again.